estimated that shipping accounts for 90% of the global transportation, but only 3% of global CO2 emissions. Can you explain why it is so important that shipping becomes zero carbon?
Yes, it's important that everybody contributes to decarbonizing globally. And shipping, I would say, is particularly important because shipping is a part of all major supply chains. Everything we buy, everything we do is somewhat affected by shipping. And shipping has always provided, or at least during the industrialization, provided very significant infrastructure to global developments, to wealth and to welfare. And we believe that shipping will continue to provide that in the future. And it means that shipping will most likely grow in the future as well. So as the rest of the world works hard to decarbonize, you could see a shipping sector that would actually increase its percentage of emissions significantly from the 3% if we don't follow suit. So shipping could be 10, 20, 30% of global emissions if we don't follow suit. A lot of the things we're buying today have a significant carbon footprint from the transportation part. So in order for products, services globally to decarbonize, transportation needs to decarbonize. And this is why it is so important that shipping decarbonizes as well, to become part of the solution.
In order to reach net zero carbon emission, a fuel transition is needed in shipping. Can you explain which fuels you think are the most promising for the future?
Our working hypothesis is that there'll be a multitude of fuels in the future. It's important for us to clarify and to create confidence that we can decarbonize shipping. So we are basically working with some main fuels, you can say, some highways, if you will, that we believe will be part of the future energy mix. But we are not trying to predict what is the winner or what is the bigger one or what is the smaller one. We're basically saying that these 4 fuels will be a part of the future fuel mix. And those 4 fuels are methanol, it's ammonia, it's methane, and it's bio-oils. And they have to be produced in a sustainable way, meaning that the carbon footprint needs to be 0 or maybe even negative. They have to be at a cost level which is acceptable, and they have to be scalable. And that's our working hypothesis, that we need to enable those 4 fuels to become part of the future fuel mix. And that's completely realistic. That will happen. It's already on its way, and it will happen. Then in addition to that, you can imagine other fuel types. You can imagine other ways of actually decarbonizing with use of wind, with use of carbon capture on board, etc., etc. But it's really important that we also just focus on making some solutions available that has high confidence. And those are the 4 main pathways.
Recently, we have seen a few of the world's largest ship owners ordering new buildings that are to be powered by methanol. How do you see the future? Will the infrastructure for methanol be in place when these ships start trading?
The ships that are now being ordered on methanol have a catalyzing effect on the whole industry. So we're seeing the initial movers on methanol powered ships, and then we're seeing a lot of new activities following that. So you're seeing on the ship owning side, actually there's a lot of interest on the methanol side. This is sending a very strong demand signal to the energy side, meaning that there are a lot of energy companies now that are really attempting to provide that fuel at reliable ways and at cost levels and so on. And of course, at the end of the day, this is a commercial decision for the fuel providers to actually invest and make it happen at scale. At what scale and what timeline this is actually going to play out is still in the making. So it's hard to say how fast this will scale up. But there are very strong signals now that it will happen at very large scale. So large ships will be given supply security. So it will be made and whether it'll be 10 ships, 30 ships, 100 ships, 500 ships in 2030, that is still an open question. But it's quite certain that it will happen at large scale.
If that regulation such as carbon levy is required in order to transform shipping into zero carbon emission, and if yes, do you see any progress in the discussions that is going on in, for instance, the IMO?
Yes, I think that it will be required in shipping. When you talk about shipping as the entire shipping industry, with 100,000 ships operating in all kinds of modes and trades, then the answer is yes, we need regulation to do that effectively. But the good thing now is that several companies are actually getting going without the regulation being in place. So we're seeing very strong movements now by ship owning companies, by cargo owners, by energy producers and technology providers. They are investing without having certainty about the regulation. And this is really something we believe will be accelerating the transition tremendously. And the narrative, I would say, has changed a lot. The sentiment has changed a lot in the industry just over the last 3 years. It used to be a conversation about we need regulation to drive the entire industry, and let's hope that it happens in IMO soon, and it doesn't. So there's been, like 5 years ago, there was this sentiment, there was this narrative in the industry that it has to happen in IMO and then we will move. That narrative has now changed to say it is happening now as we speak. Companies are investing, we're getting going with the first initiatives. It will be at a scale of 1, 5, 10%, driven by these first movers and the fast followers. But those activities will inspire and inform the regulators and the rest of the industry to actually get the standards in place, get the regulation in place, get, you can say, confidence in what it takes and what it implies to run zero carbon transportation. And therefore, these first mover activities are actually catalyzing and accelerating the transition. Also through, I would say, the discussions in IMO, where there's a lot of uncertainty now that keeps popping up in the discussions about future regulation. Once ships are actually running on the green fuels and we understand the technical implications and the commercial implications and the regulatory implications of running ships on zero carbon fuel, it'll be much harder, you can say, to argue that it's uncertain to do it. It will not be. It will be known territory, and it'll be at much less risk and much less uncertainty that we can devise the regulations and the future for the future. So I think that's really the dynamics that's going on at the moment. And to your question about progress in IMO, I think it's great that IMO decided the greenhouse gas strategy in 2018. That actually laid out a roadmap for updating the regulations in 2023. And despite, you can say, a lot of discussions and a lot of ambiguity at this point in time, it's also fair to say that IMO is actually following the process that was laid out in 2018. We've just had an MEPC meeting now last week, a lot of discussions in that. That was very much a working session, you can say, gathering input. And then next year will be extremely important in order to converge all those ideas into very concrete targets. We need to have more ambitious targets than was set in 2018, and also more concrete concepts for the actual regulation that is going to drive the industry along. So I think, yes, regulation will be important. We are progressing on the regulatory side, and I'm quite hopeful that we'll see good progress this year and next year.
If you were one wish fulfilled in regards to achieving net zero carbon emissions from shipping, what should that be?
I would then wish that there was a silver bullet solution that could just do it. The thing is that there is not. And this is why we need the sector-wide collaboration. So my real wish is actually that the sector continues to come together continues to mature the understanding of what is needed over the next decade to put the transition on a robust track to zero. And this means that over the next 8 years, we need to see the different segments of shipping, tank, bulk, container, cruise, ro-ro, etc. They all understand how are they going to do it. We need to see those systems in operation in 2026, and by 2030 we need to see regulation in place. We need to see a sustainable fuel supply chain which is scaling. We need to see that the ships are taking on board the technologies that will actually use those future fuels, and we need to see energy efficiency at a much higher level today across the entire industry. Those things need to be in place, and that is actually my real dream for this decade. And I do believe that the mindset, and maybe that's the most important thing, that the mindset of the leading players of the industry, both in public side with authorities and the regulators and in private sector side, they are all saying the same thing. You hear it here again and again. We need to collaborate. And that is really the acknowledgement that is going to make the change this time around. That when these leading players come together and are transparent about the targets we need to set, how we will arrive at the standards and the confidence that this is how we're going to do it, then the market will be there. And then from 2030 onwards, there'll be an enormous market to actually deliver the technologies and the fuels and the shipping services for the future. So that is the real dream. Let's collaborate now for the next 8 years to get it on track, and then from there on the market will arrive, and that'll be a huge one. So that's it.